My Life as I Remember It, Chapter 1, Part 3, Anthras. The road from Anthras to Middlesboro, Kentucky, ran beside the Middlesboro Airport on the outskirts of town. Airplanes were parked on both sides of the road. I always anticipated the ride past the airplanes, and most of the time Dad would stop and let me look. Airplanes were magnificent machines, and I loved everything about them, even the smell. On my 9th birthday, when we lived at Egan, Tennessee, Dad treated me to an airplane ride from the Middlesboro Airport. It was a yellow Piper Cub, and that airplane ride was the highlight of my life at that time. Later on in the war, after we moved to La Follette, Tennessee, I heard on the radio that an Army Air Force airplane made an emergency landing in Middlesboro. The airplane was sitting there waiting for some parts and maintenance before the Army could move it. I wanted to see that aircraft more than anything, and was disappointed when the Army flew it out before we could get over to Middlesboro. I can't remember what kind of airplane it was, but from the description in the news, as much as I can remember, it was one of the large bombers of the day, and something I would have been fascinated with seeing. From this same airport, October 2002, Patty and I would witness the return to the sky after 60 years, a United States Army P-38 named Glacier Girl. This P-38 was recovered from a glacier in Newfoundland, where it crash-landed while being ferried to an active combat unit. The History Channel was filming a documentary the day it returned to the air. If you want to learn more about this airplane, the video is available from the History Channel, and it's possible, if you look close, you may see Pat and I in the crowd shots. Betty and I suffered from car sickness during those trips to Middlesboro. I think the problem was with the design of those automobiles in the 1930s and 40s. The windows were small, the ventilation wasn't good, and the road was extremely curvy. I can't remember any sick-free trips to Middlesboro. Once Betty and I were eating celery in the car as we came over the mountain. That was our worst trip, and I can remember how sick we became. That memory is so vivid, it could have happened yesterday, and same with Betty. She and I have talked about it, and she remembers it the same as I do. Going to Middlesboro was a treat, and I always look forward to seeing the sights and listening to the sounds. The streets were always crowded with people in the military. Rather, the streets were always crowded with people in the military wearing their uniforms proudly. Mother always dressed me in a uniform replica of an Army or Navy officer, and I can remember being saluted by several of the military guys. This was a fun time for a young boy, and I was completely oblivious to the seriousness of the war. I can only remember knowing that something made the adults look serious when they talked about it. Most everything was rationed during the Second World War, and Mother walked to Tackett Creek from Anthras to the Tackett Creek School to pick up our ration stamps. She usually took me with her, and I can remember those walks to the school. Several items were rationed during the Second World War, and to purchase gasoline, tires, sugar, and several other items required those stamps. Dad was always fixing flat tires because of imitation rubber, let me read that again. Dad was always fixing flat tires because rubber was rationed during World War II. Automobile tires used red synthetic rubber for inner tubes. This was several years before we had tubeless tires. The synthetic rubber was flimsy, and it was almost impossible to keep them from going flat. And it was almost impossible to use the synthetic... I'm getting all goofed up here, so I'm not going to go back and redo it. It was almost impossible to use this synthetic rubber to make flippers. Each time you stretched this red, poor excuse for rubber, the thing would break. If you lay it in the sun for a long period of time, it would dry out and crumble. Occasionally, we found a piece of old rubber from an old inner tube, and then you could make a flipper. Once I accidentally killed a bird with my flipper, and the kids that saw it thought I was a real good flipper shooter. I was amazed when my rock hit the bird, but I didn't let them know how sad killing that bird made me feel. That's another one of those memories firmly planted in my brain.